despite that capex outlay last year, we saw that there wasn't a virtuous cycle of growth, of investment, of job creation. Private investment still seemed reluctant to put their money where the government hoped they would. And there is a concern that they still might not. There are global headwinds out there. There's a potential possibility of recession later this year. Is that something that the government countenances for? That, you know, they seem to believe we are in a virtuous cycle of growth, investment, job creation. That's not happened so far in the last few years. Forget about the pandemic, but even post-pandemic, it's still not here. Will this budget trigger those animal spirits?
You are speaking, you referred to two things which are important. You referred to global headwinds. And as I said, India has weathered the global headwinds better than anybody else. I mean, just look at our neighborhood, look at other developed countries around the world. You referred to the lower level of private sector investment. Now, that's not a new thing. That's been an issue for now several decades in India. Now, to make up for that, the government has put in enormous public investment to get this economy to the level where it is. Now, today, we are the fastest growing large economy in the world. We are the 5th largest in the world, whereas when this government started, we were the 10th largest in the world. So we have come up quite a bit. We have, as I already mentioned earlier, better track record of managing the fiscal deficit and managing inflation than almost any other nation in the world. Now, you can't say that the animal spirits haven't been ignited. Look at the startup sector. Despite some of the recent difficulties, now India today is the 3rd largest platform for the startup sector. These are creating jobs. I refer to the jobs which have been created. It doesn't happen just like that.
Let Dr. Tharoor respond to what you're saying, that Dr. Tharoor, Jai Panda and a number of people in government say, despite the difficult times that the world has gone through in the last few years, India, and this is not just the government saying it, but even international agencies saying it, India is the fastest growing economy at the moment in the world, albeit at times on a lower base, but the fact is it is, and the fact is, according to international global agencies, it is a shining light. How do you respond to that? That the fact is our inflation is relatively lower compared to other countries, we haven't slipped into recession, so many of the doomsdayers have been proven wrong.
Well, look, let's understand what this means, right? If we're talking about growing at perhaps 6.5%, I might add 7% this year, but don't forget the first 6 months of this year, we grew at 9.7%. So to end up at 7% over the year means that the second 6 months of this year, we're going to be growing at something like 4.5% or under. So the overall is coming at 7, which means the pace is slowing down, despite the higher capex expenditure that Jai Panda and the government talk about with such pride. Secondly, the capex expenditure has not always been completely allocated. So last year, there were 22,000 crores they didn't spend of the money they allocated. So they suddenly increased by another 2.5 lakh crores. Are they going to be able to spend all that money? It remains to be seen. Thirdly, I've given you the unemployment figures at the beginning of our conversation. An increase in GDP does not necessarily correlate to an increase in employment, because a lot of our growth has been jobless growth or relatively job-light growth. In the 70s, 1% of GDP meant 2 lakh jobs. Today, it just doesn't anymore. And therefore, we really have to ask ourselves, how many jobs is the government going to create in order to absorb the rather large numbers of unemployed young people who will need to be absorbed, because obviously it's a national priority for us to make sure there are things to do. Now, at the same time, there are some real questions which we haven't had answers to about how the government exactly intends to keep to these numbers. They've actually announced targets every year that they fail to meet, whether it's about the fiscal deficit, whether it's about other things. And I heard Uday Mukherjee say that the fiscal deficit calculations are based on reasonable assumptions, and I'll take his word for it. But we'll have to see them matching it. Don't forget that they had pledged to come down to 4.5%. They're now talking about coming down to 5.9 the following year, which is still a long way away from 4.5. I don't want to be really singing a song of doom, because I'm an Indian too. I want my economy to flourish. I want my country to succeed. But there are some real questions. I don't think the tax benefits are going to be remotely as exciting when people parse the numbers and they realize that under the existing tax regime, they have more exemptions than they will under the new one. And in any case, any money they save is going to be consumed in inflation. because essential commodities prices have continued to go up. Transfers to states are going to go down. A lot of the state governments are going to be squealing in the next couple of days. You can be sure of that, because what was promised is not what is coming out of this budget numbers. So we're looking at some real concerns. Even the capex, a lot of the capex, frankly, is that instead of giving grants to the states, you're giving them interest-free loans.
Okay,
I've heard Jay talk about how important it is to have a 50-year interest-free loan, but a loan is still a loan. A grant can actually be spent without having to worry about paying it back. And many of these state governments are pretty broke themselves.
I've got many more voices joining me in a moment, but I'll give Jai Panda the final word. Jai Panda, if you were to summarize this budget for us in 30 seconds, what according to you makes it stand out? You said it's spectacular, a word that I've not been using. I've been using the word solid. What about this budget makes it spectacular? 30 seconds.
I already told you 33% increase in infrastructure allocation, and it's not as if it's not being spent. I explained to you that in 3 years it's gone from 3.5 lakh crores to 5.5 lakh crores, 7.5 lakh crores, and now 10 lakh crores. The track record is there for all to see. 90 million households have been connected with drinking water. 12 crore households have been connected with toilets. Nearly 10 crore LPG connections. The opposition has always been skeptical, cynical, and sometimes downright obstructive. They have obstructed GST. They have called it all sorts of names. It's giving us 1,50,000 crores revenue every month. They made fun about Jan Dhan accounts when they were first opened, but the JAM trilogy has made this transformation possible. They made fun of the vaccine initiatives. India is hailed as the world's vaccine supplier. Not the largest ever, the fastest ever vaccination campaign, but also helps dozens of other countries. This, to sum up, this budget is not just for 2024. This budget is the groundwork for 2047. This is the first budget of Amrit Kal, and India is shining in a way that the whole world is appreciating.
I was waiting for the word Amrit Kal to be used. It was the word most used by the FM as well.